You would like people to buy your book.
Today we shall discuss the interview Jon Stewart had with Ayaan Hirsi Ali in The Daily Show on March the 23rd of this year. Before we start, viewers may notice that my usual companion, Michiel Liuma, is not here right now, and as a replacement we have this guy. The second thing viewers may notice is that we are speaking a different language than usual. This is to avoid having to translate this English interview into Dutch before being able to discuss it. This also means that the audience that's able to understand The Daily Show is also able to understand this discussion about it.
So, first of all, we have to say that we both are big fans of Jon Stewart, and we also admire Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who was born in Somalia but in her 20s fled to our country of the Netherlands, where she was an MP for some years. So, we thought this would be a very interesting interview between two people we like to see talk. But we found that the interview never really took off. So we thought we'd analyze this interview somewhat to maybe be able to pinpoint where the problems are that we seem to perceive.
The book is called Heretic, Why Islam Needs a Reformation Now. My first question would be, why does Islam need a reformation now?
Because, unfortunately, too many people are dying in the name of Islam. Too many women live under oppression. Mm-hmm. Too many Jews are being demonized for it. Too many gays are being killed in the name of Islam. Too many Christians are being killed in the name of Islam. And I think it really has the answers to have the Reformation now.
She calls for a reformation. She does that in the subtitle of her book, and she repeats that here. The question is, does she mean a reformation such as the Christians had? Yeah. And if she does she mean it in the exact same way? Should it unfold exactly the same? Yeah. Or does she mean reform? Then Jon Stewart, I think, rightly replies to that word, reformation, and he says...
But isn't it, if I'm remembering the Reformation correctly, and it's been a while, aren't we having that now? Aren't we having the Reformation now? The Reformation was Martin Luther wanted a purer form of Christianity. And so when he put that up there, it created 100 years of violence and mayhem. Isn't that the process that we are going through right now?
So Jon Stewart seems to define Reformation as a violent religious split up in which one of the two parties wants a purer form of the faith. If that's your definition, you could certainly say that this is happening right now in Islam.
Yes.
You could also say it happened long before the Christian Reformation, because the split up between Sunni and Shia Muslims occurred right after the death of Muhammad.
It is the process that we're going through right now, and it's the process that I describe in the book, that talk of reformation in Islam has been underway for a while. And what's interesting about now is, yes, there's a great deal of violence in the name of Islam, but there is an emerging and incredibly important minority of reformers who are risking their lives in trying to get this change done. And I stand with them. I hope you stand with them.
She's saying a minority of reformers, which is different from reformationists.
She's trying to connect with Jon Stewart.
Yeah, she's trying to jump over this divide.
And she acknowledges that the process Jon Stewart calls Reformation is happening right now.
Here I feel Jon Stewart is slipping up a bit, because he doesn't jump over that divide with her.
Right. Well, no, I mean, I guess my point is, I think people single out Islam as though there's something inherently wrong with it that wasn't wrong with other religions.
Well, people are not at the other side of his table. Ayaan Hirsi Ali is, so it's a bit unfair to attack her from what other people or people in general maybe are thinking or saying.
And so I guess my point is, if Christianity went through almost the exact same process, people who thought they knew better and were pure, and that created violence, and so why is... I get the sense that you think Islam is different than other religions.
She doesn't seem to say that. Maybe she says it in the book. We haven't read the book because we're discussing this interview.
He almost pretends that he is continuing in the same vein, but he is not. His point here is not Reformation is something violent. His point is Islam is going through a violent process right now, which you might call a reformation, but Christianity went through a very comparable process. So why is Islam worse?
Yeah,
That's a different point.
exactly. So Ayaan Hirsi Ali replies, essentially negating his contention.
Well, I'm saying that Christianity went through that process of reformation and enlightenment and came to a place where the mass of Christians, at least in the Western world,
Right.
have accepted tolerance in the secular state, the separation of church and state, respect for women, respect for gays.
I think here Jon Stewart should definitely be able to read between the lines, because apparently this is what she desires for the Muslim world.
Yes.
Not just a reformation, but an enlightenment. And also tolerance, secularism, respect for gays, respect for women. Apparently that's what she would like to see in the
Yes.
Muslim world.
And I think these improvements she mentions are more easily attributable to the Enlightenment than to the Reformation.
Exactly.
So it's very telling, I think, that she includes the word enlightenment here.
So I think she could have avoided the problems of this interview by just having the subtitle of her book read Why Islam Needs Either Reform Now or an Enlightenment Now.
Yes, or moderation.
Right. Well,
The Muslim world, well, yeah, but it's...
and in
it's-
Africa, I think
yeah,
there are still, Central African Republic still has Christian.
Catholics who, in the name of Catholicism,
Yes.
despise and are homophobic. And
Also behead Muslims and do crazy things.
I think this is quite childish. Well, they're both bad. But she's not here to discuss everything or all the problems in the world, which, of course, not all the problems are attributable to religion or to Muslims or to Christians or to whatever. But she's here to attack one specific problem as she sees it. And then him saying, well, other people behave problematically as well. That's his version of the tu quoque or you as well fallacy. It's a fallacy,
Yes.
and it doesn't help anything.
Yeah, the Central African Republic. But
Yeah.
the majority of Christians, unlike the majority of Muslims, are not subjected to violence. And if you look at the 70% of global violence in the world today,
Right.
Muslims are responsible, and the largest number
Are
of victims
suffering
are
from it.
Muslims.
It
He
seems
makes
like-
the same point on top of her.
Yeah.
So it seems like he's making the point,
Yeah.
but she was going to
Yeah.
as well. And it's important because it proves that she feels bad for the Muslim community.
Yeah, of which she is a product. And what's also weird to me is that Jon Stewart doesn't really respond to the 70% figure. If that percentage were true, I don't know if it is. It might be, it might not be. But if that was true, that would be extraordinary and
Yes.
would warrant further discussion.
Yes,
And if it
yeah.
wasn't true, then it would be a very large lie,
Yeah.
which also would warrant discussion. He proceeds by repeating his previous point about the anti-Muslim narrative.
But I guess my point is, it seems like the narrative is from some reformers that there's something inherently wrong with this religion that is not wrong with other religions. And
So
that's the thing that I'm trying to get at.
Jon Stewart proposes the difference between Christianity and Islam isn't that just the timing and the stage of development? And she agrees with him. So I really don't see why he keeps
Yeah.
going on about this.
Yeah, and of course, I'm not saying that it is, but it is possible that two religions are fundamentally different. Certainly, religions that focus and base themselves on a supposedly holy, infallible text. If you have a vastly immoral book, and on the other hand, you have a very moral, elegant book, then there will be some differences in the people who base their lives on those books.
Yes.
So in theory, it is possible that religions are fundamentally different, and that one could be justifiably named worse than the other. I don't think that's the case with Christianity and Islam. I just think that what Hirsi Ali is saying is, well, let's look at the here and now. Which of the major religions causes the most problems right now? The answer to that question has not always been the same. It has not always been Islam, although I think that it's a fair case to be made that should be the answer this year. But if we were having this discussion in the 12th century AD, then Christianity would be more violent and less enlightened than Islam, because Islamic scholars in the 11th and 12th century were the ones who reintroduced the ancient Greek scientific texts to the world again. And that led to the Renaissance of Baghdad, a good 300 or more years before the Italian Renaissance. The Enlightenment of Islam has already happened once, but it needs to happen again.
This leads me to think that the popular theory that because Islam is younger than Christianity, it is in an earlier stage of development,
Yeah.
is not entirely true.
No,
It looks more like a cycle.
not necessarily always repetitive, but not everything improves all the time. Jon Stewart makes half of his living attacking, or at least reacting to Christian politicians in America, who are extremely stupid. Some of them, right? Not all of them, but some of them are stupid. That's why he's been able to mine them for comedy gold for so long.
He's had some statements that to me sound kind of liberal. It has taken me aback.
The Pope isn't conservative enough for these people.
What if he got the accusation, well, why are you focusing on Christianity so much in American politics? Isn't Islam just as bad? I get the sense that you think Christianity is somehow worse than other religions. But he wouldn't, of course, be saying that, because the simple fact is that Islam doesn't have remotely the same influence in American politics as Christianity does. So he's just reacting to a current state of affairs, and so is Hirsi Ali. But in America, the focus is on Christians. And in the world, maybe the focus should be more on Islam than on Christianity.
Yes, right now.
Right now, yeah. And that might be different in 200 years. Well, she tries to clarify it again.
Yeah, so here's the key point.
Yes.
There were Christians, within Christianity who came out and said, we need to change things, we need to reform, basically.
So here she uses the word reform,
Yes.
which is different from reformation.
She doesn't mean Martin Luther here, I guess.
No.
There are now Muslims today in growing numbers, not as large as I would like to see, but in growing
Right.
numbers who are not pointing the finger towards Jews or Christians or American foreign policy or some other external factor, but they're saying
Right.
there's something wrong within our religion.
Well, this is also pretty telling, because people within that religion of Islam apparently see something that Jon Stewart doesn't see or doesn't want to see.
And what I'm trying to do here, as someone who grew up in the religion and came out of it, and very much, driven by a desire to change, or to bring about change, or to bring
Right.
about change in the conversation, is okay. Let's identify then what is wrong about what is it with Islam that we need to change, and then I have these 5 key points.
She says, as someone who grew up in the religion and came out of it. So I guess she says she is not a Muslim herself.
Yeah, and I think she's an atheist.
She thought that was the best decision for her. She doesn't recommend it, though, to other Muslims.
In this book, at least. There seems to be a strategic element to
Yes.
it. Like maybe because her previous book, which I also didn't read, was called Infidel, which is something different from heretic.
Yes.
Stronger, I would say.
Is it better for an atheist to convince religious people to moderate their religion than it is for an atheist to try and get them out of the religion? Does that, in the end, lead to faster improvements, greater improvements?
In the eyes of the atheist, yeah.
In principle, I think you should be honest about
Your
your
agenda.
real thoughts and your real agenda. If I, as an atheist, would speak to religious people and tell them, you can keep your religion, it's fine. It's not fine for me. I don't want it, but it's fine for you.
It's a bit condescending. It reeks of faiththeism, belief in belief.
Yeah.
People who themselves do not have theistic belief, but say that they admire people who do, or wish they could have it as those common people do.
So you might say she has either adopted faiththeism a bit, or she is not entirely honest. She has a hidden agenda.
Yeah, I think it's the second one.
Yeah.
And then again, like a broken record, Jon Stewart comes back to the Reformation bit.
But I guess what I'm saying is the Reformation was not people who wanted to moderate Christianity. It was people who wanted it pure, who felt that the Catholic Church had become corrupt.
But I think by now he should certainly know that that's not really what she means.
No.
And I think he does know that.
Yeah.
He just wants to...
Hammer it home.
She did choose stupidly, I think, for the word Reformation, but maybe it's time to let that go now.
Yeah.
By the way, by using that word moderation, I think he implicitly acknowledges that that's what she really means. At this point, I also think that Ayaan should acknowledge her mistake, or at least her very unclear choice of words. But she doesn't hear.
So the two religions, Christianity is different from Islam. The ones in Islam who are, the Islamic State right now in Iraq and Syria,
Right.
groups like that, they
want a more pure form,
They want it in a
as they interpret it, which is...
And then Jon Stewart says, as they interpret it. That's also a common thread in discussions about religion. Well, those bad interpretations or those immoral interpretations are just interpretations of immoral people who twist the words of the Bible who twist the words of the Quran, or who pervert the true intention of the true spirit of those books. And I think she rightly taps him on the nose for that by saying...
Well, and as they apply it, and as
they
the
apply
Quran says, and as the Prophet Muhammad lived in Medina, they're trying to emulate him in that time.
So there are things in the Quran that are just cited literally by groups like ISIS.
Yeah.
That does not mean that what they are doing is the best interpretation of that book, but it also doesn't mean that what they're doing is totally comes out of thin air. And the same goes for Christian fundamentalists and Jewish fundamentalists. Settlers in Israel probably have a hard time leaving their settlements, which are illegal, because they think that the Lord has promised them that land. That definitely plays a part. I think it's telling about religion that the stricter you follow the fundamentals, the more of a dick you're perceived to be.
Yes, fundamentalism is always wrong. So that must mean there's something wrong with the fundamentals.
What I'm arguing for here is for Muslims to accept the fact that this book is written by men a long time ago.
To my mind, she can mean two things by this. She could mean see it as a piece of literature. It's not divine. It could still contain great teachings, so it could still be an important text culturally, but there's nothing supernatural about it. If that's what she means, I give up my previous point about dishonesty, about hidden agendas, because then she actually wants Muslims to step out of the faith. She might also mean it was written by men, but those men may have been inspired by God. But there's something tricky about an atheist recommending this.
And the morality
But
of
that hasn't been
of the
accepted in
7th
Christianity
century.
yet.
Yeah, and then he interrupts her again with his version of the tu quoque fallacy. We're not having a discussion on Christianity. And secondly, I think that has been accepted in Christianity a lot more than in Islam. Even as early as the Concili of Constantine, the Roman emperor, which she held to determine which Gospels would be included in the canonical Bible and which would be excluded.
Yeah.
And there were votes on it, and people knew that. I don't think that was a secret. Certainly isn't a secret now. And I do think that in Christianity that has been more accepted, right? They say, of course, first it was an oral tradition over hundreds of years, then it was written down by men, but it was all under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. But in Islam there may be still some work to be done on that, in that field, because they think that Muhammad wrote it in 23 years.
They believe it was dictated in one go, never edited, never changed, and it is the literal word of God.
Right. The final revelation of God.
And the final revelation. Muslims are a little bit more anal about their holy book than Christians.
The morality of the 7th century doesn't apply in the 21st century, and they have to give that up.
That's
think,
different.
I honestly think that most Christians have accepted that.
That the Bible is written by man.
that the morality of God knows when
That's different,
doesn't apply now.
Admitting that the morality of the 7th century doesn't apply in the 21st century is not exactly the same as admitting the book was written by men. It could be written by God himself in 7th century language and using 7th century phenomena, describing 7th century things. It does seem strange to me that God's morals have expiration dates, have a shelf life.
Yeah.
Though still, I don't think it's exactly the same point. She seems to slightly steer away from her point about authorship of holy books now, and she just sticks with the morality of the early days is not applicable now.
She's very slippery as well in this interview.
The group that I call the Mecca Muslims, on the one hand, they're struggling to be as true to their religion as they possibly can, while on the other hand, they're struggling to then, be modern and live peaceful, prosperous lives.
She feels sympathy for the Muslims, which she calls Mecca Muslims. She wants to help them rhyme those two things that do not seem to rhyme, and in my mind, don't rhyme. And then I think she tries to focus the discussion again on an important point, namely, what is it in a concrete sense that she would like to see changed.
She points towards the book as she says it.
Yeah.
And this triggers Jon Stewart.
Yeah, to an extremely stupid remark that is unworthy of him, I think.
And I think the way out of that is to start the conversation on the problematic.
You would like people to buy your book.
Well, yeah. Everyone who is there to sell a cultural product.
Yes, it's a ridiculous accusation, even as a joke.
She wants people to buy her book because she thinks the ideas in the book are important.
Jon Stewart's reluctance to criticize Islam or religion generally is something I notice often among Western liberals. There is a tendency to criticize almost all aspects of religion, but never to reject the idea of religion in general.
For instance, you see it with Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of South Park, whom we also greatly admire. They made an episode attacking the famous atheist Richard Dawkins for being too vitriolic or too...
Bitchy, they call it.
Bitchy, yeah, they call him bitchy. Here's what they have to say about Richard Dawkins.
Dawkins' book to me sounded exactly like that kid when you were in high school, that 15-year-old that was running around going, "Don't be stupid, God!" And it was just like, yeah, we know.
Even if you can read parts of Richard Dawkins' book or Sam Harris's book and agree with them, you're just the tone of it is so bitchy and whiny that you just are like, ugh.
I find this very weird because, first of all, not everyone in class is saying, yeah, we know. A lot of people are saying, no, it's not bullshit. It is real, right? Secondly, they themselves, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, act like that same kid when it comes to Scientology, which everyone knows is a sham, but they still attack it.
The frozen alien bodies were loaded onto Xenu's galactic cruisers, which look like DC-8s, except with rocket engines.
Why aren't they the kid in the class saying, well, Scientology is stupid, don't you know? Everyone knows that. Why make an episode about that? And also Mormonism, which they attack in another episode, and in their musical, The Book of Mormon. Their tone is different from that of Richard Dawkins. They are more...
playful.
Joseph Smith was called a prophet, dum 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 dum. He started the Mormon religion, dum 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 dum.
Playful, and also, especially in the Mormon episode, the ending is sympathetic towards the Mormon kid and not towards the critic of his religion, Stan.
Look, maybe us Mormons do believe in crazy stories that make absolutely no sense, and maybe Joseph Smith did make it all up. But I have a great life and a great family, and I have the Book of Mormon to thank for that.
And also in many of their episodes, they, as you said, attack religion, various fundamental points of religion. And I think it's safe to say that at least 15 or 20 of the major points scored by the so-called new atheists, they themselves score as well. But pulling them all together, that seems a bridge too far for them and also for Jon Stewart.
Unfortunately, we cannot expect much improvement of Trevor Noah Jon Stewart's successor in September.
Trevor Noah has sent out some tweets in 2011 about atheists and primarily about Christopher Hitchens. So Christopher Hitchens wrote a book that atheists live by. They worship him and believe in his teachings. We all need a God. We don't all need a God. Maybe we all need heroes or someone to look up to, but that's profoundly different.
Another tweet says, without God, atheists wouldn't exist. My reply to that is, without God, everyone would be an atheist.
Yeah.
So there would be no need for the word. Atheists would exist, but they wouldn't be calling themselves atheists.
Because there would be no theism.
What he's trying to say is, atheists depend on God for their existence. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like saying, without crime, we wouldn't have police.
Yeah. So thank God we have crime. Yeah.
Or without crime, policemen would be out of a job.
Also very disappointing stance on atheism and theism by the next Daily Show host.
I would like to change the conversation. Yeah, buy my book. Please read it for yourself. Yeah, thank you.
It's on the bookshelves now. Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
We would like to change the conversation as well.
On this topic, yes.
And this conversation particularly.
Yeah, this one should have been changed also. Yeah. And it might be a good idea to have young Muslims who want to interpret the religion or the Quran or the Hadith of the Sharia differently, or maybe even not at all, be able to say without fear of punishment or even death in some countries that they do not believe everything that the book says. To say, well, I do not follow it as strict as you do, Dad, or I do not interpret it the same way you do, Mr. Imam. I see things differently. They should be able to say that freely, and I do not have the feeling that that is the case everywhere in the world right now. And I think it's very important to enable them to do so, and I think Jon Stewart should have contributed to that. Right?
Yes. And he clearly didn't. He was stepping on the brake, you might say.
Yeah.
Constantly.